Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
Hello, this is Ilona Thompson with Palate Exposure, and I'm here with Maayan Koschitzky and Miguel Luna. And it's a very exciting opportunity to get to know them and their brand, Pelle. We'll start with Maayan, and please tell us where you're from, your background.
Sure, yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm originally from Israel. I started to make wine back in 2004, and in 2010 I decided to move to Napa and started to look on opportunities and ways to move here, and I had a great opportunity to work at a winery at Screaming Eagle, and that's what brought me here. And I've make the long story short, after a few years I met Philippe Melka, and today I work for Philippe Melka. That's my real job, working for Philippe Melka as director of winemaking, managing the day-to-day for him. And then Miguel and I started Pelle in 2016, so 2016 vintage was our first vintage.
So you said two words, Screaming Eagle, that gets just about every serious wine lover's attention.
Right.
That is the cult that's unsurpassed.
Right.
Many tried. None reached that kind of apogee. So how did you get an opportunity to...
Honestly, I was very lucky. I was working in Israel for a very famous winemaker, owner, Dr. Margalit. And Dr. Margalit he was a very famous, still chemistry professor from Davis, from UC Davis, and he wrote very famous books about wine chemistry, wine technology, and people use them for school. And get to work for him is to be his winemaker for it's probably the top winery in Israel. So that already opened some doors, and then I was lucky enough that my resume ended up at Screaming Eagle, and they reached out to me at some point and asked me if I'm interested in internship. And to be totally honest, it's kind of a funny story, and I think Miguel heard it a million times.
I can't wait.
I never heard about Screaming Eagle before. Before getting the application, Israel is very much European driven. It's very heavy on Europe and old world more than new world. And California wines usually don't get all the way to Israel because they're expensive already here. So by the time you export them and taxes, they're so expensive that you really don't see them. So I got the email, I opened my computer, and I spoke with my brother, and I saw what Screaming Eagle is all about, which the website doesn't really tell you anything.
Nope.
But
it's the most clandestine website ever.
Right. Join our mailing list, and that's about it. So I just Googled it quickly and said, okay, this is very interesting, and probably I should explore it. And I flew to California for an interview, and went to visit them and learn more about who they are. And it was a young winemaker that joined to Screaming Eagle back in 2010, and he was the winemaker taking over, and he offered me to come for an internship, and from there staying full time. So that's kind of what pulled me into Napa.
So was it Andy Erickson that you worked with?
Andy actually, when they interviewed me at the beginning, Andy was still involved, but Andy left. It was Nick Gislason.
Nick Gislason, yeah. So you worked with him very closely.
So that was his first vintage when he took over and I joined. And I worked with him very closely for a few years, and he's a great guy. So it was fun.
So what are your thoughts on Screaming Eagle now?
That's so funny. That's the name that always catches. Everyone wants to talk about Screaming Eagle.
Oh yes, getting away from that.
I think it's amazing. I mean, obviously, the wine is really good. It's all about the site. I think Screaming Eagle is one of those unique places in the valley that they just got everything. They got a great mix of soils, and their vineyard just expresses Napa in a great way. So I think the wine, I don't know about the price, and we can have a discussion about the price, if it makes sense or not, but it's definitely a great wine. Comes from a great site.
So Screaming Eagle, in your mind, is Screaming Eagle for a reason. There's a legitimate... Absolutely.
And I think the time is proving that consistently every year it's one of the top wineries in one of the top wines, and they always perform. I remember 2011 vintage, which was a very tough vintage for Napa Valley. We made great wines in 2011. I feel like the vineyards it's an earlier site, and the vineyards still performed to make a really high-end quality wines.
How long were you there?
I left in 2014. In 2014, I left to join Philippe.
Got it. So I want to go back a little bit deeper into your upbringing and how you how you came to be in the wine world. So you grew up in...
Yeah, so I grew up in a small village,
Okay.
Farming village. We have a farm, but vegetables and fruits, never wine. It's not a wine region in Israel.
Okay.
And after the army, I traveled the world. I was in the Israeli army and traveled the world.
Compulsory in Israel.
Yeah, for 3 years, and I was in the paratroopers and left and went to travel. My first true interaction with wine was in Mendoza, in Argentina.
Okay.
Yeah, I was traveling for over a year with my girlfriend at the time, wife now, and we loved Mendoza. We ended up staying for 2-3 weeks there, and just visiting wineries, and we were 21 years old, 22, but we really fell in love. Came back to Israel and went to study mechanical engineering, not really wine. And when I got to the end, when I wrote my thesis, I actually decided to write it about processing and sorting grapes. And
Why?
the reason it was very trendy in Israel. I didn't invent anything. It's late 90s. The wine industry in Israel was starting to really boom everywhere, and we had more and more wineries. And I wanted to find something that connects me back to the land. So I wrote the thesis. I fell in love, and while writing the thesis, I made one barrel. I did like a 1-year class from grape to bottle. Made one barrel. I called it one barrel. And label it as the label is very ugly. It's one barrel, and I still have a few bottles. And then I said, okay, this is amazing. I mean, I think I want to switch and go for that. And applied for a job in a winery in Israel in La Valley. It's a kosher winery in the Judean Hills, and started to work as an intern. And stayed as assistant winemaker, and went back to the agriculture faculty in Israel to do more agronomist viticulture. Not necessarily wine, actually. I was more on the vineyard side in the beginning, but slowly shifted into more winemaking.
So it was entirely unplanned, mechanical engineering
Totally.
to viticulture. What did your family think about that?
My father is a farmer.
Okay.
He's retired, but he's a farmer, and he was very excited that one of his 3 boys is actually going back to the land. The other 2 are computer engineers, so they don't necessarily care about farming. They enjoy living on the ranch, but they don't really do anything in the farming. So he was excited. He didn't really had an interaction with growing grapes or wine grapes, which is very different, and we can talk about it. But it's very different farming. For conventional farmer that work with table grapes, to see what we are doing to the vineyards, it's hard for them to understand. And my mom passed away, unfortunately, in 2003, so she never saw any part of my winemaking career. But I think she always knew I'm going to follow my passion. I mean, I wanted to do something that I enjoy and makes me happy. I don't want to wake up in the morning to something that I don't love. So wine worked. It's still working.
It sounds really charmed. You do what you love. Of all the wineries you're interning into Screaming Eagle, it's sort of like you could maybe say Romani Conti would be something that might top it.
Yeah, I'll take Romani Conti.
But for the new world, it simply doesn't get any more famous. I don't want to say get any better, because that's a different qualification, but it really is the pinnacle of what you could be exposed to in the context of California viticulture.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was very lucky. I had no idea how. It took me even more than a year to be in California. I met Miguel in 2014, but before that, when I was at Screaming Eagle, I didn't know what does it mean and how big the name is. I was mainly working. I mean, it's a winery in Oakville. We go in the morning to work. We start very early in the morning, and we leave very late in the afternoon. And I didn't know anyone in Napa. I was for 3 years just there. Only when I started to work with Philippe Melka, I got to know more people and got to know the more vineyards around the valley and more wines. The one thing I did do during the 3 years, it was always my goal. I went to taste once a week, and I tried to visit as many wineries as I can, because my original plan was to move back home. So I took a day a week in the afternoons, even more than a day, and I tried to visit at least 2-3 wineries every week, just to make sure I keep visiting Napa wines, so I gain more knowledge about Napa.
Any highlights during that time? Any of the wineries that really...
I did it, like a mechanical engineer, I guess. I structured it very well. I had appellation after appellation.
Good. There's some consumer intel here. That's how you taste Napa Valley, do it appellation.
Absolutely. And then finding the big names, obviously, but then go down to the family. Or I was really looking for the old school growers like Philip Togni on Pritchard Hill, on Spring Mountain, Howell Mountain with Dunn family. I was looking for those kind of producers that I can really go and see what they're doing for years and years. I think my highlights was always Dunn is my highlight, and I just love the people, but I also love the wines.
They're built to last, for sure.
Yeah.
I think some of them might outlive me.
Yeah, they're beautiful wines. I love those wines and the people behind them. And so it's kind of like the classics of Napa that I fell in love with, Diamond Creek, and then the new world in Napa that makes really great wines that on Pritchard Hill, and with wines that we work now by Brand and Ovid and Dalla Valle, of course, and other great producers.
You said something that really caught my attention. Again, not to make it about Screaming Eagle, but people have this kind of very fairy dust impression of what it takes to be at the vineyard and to do the actual work. And you said Screaming Eagle is no different. You just show up and you do what you're supposed to do. Like, can you describe what your early morning, I assume, and afternoon are like? Like, what is a day in the life of Maayan?
I think my life today is a little different because now I'm involved with multiple projects and different appellations, vineyards, farmers. But when you work in a state, like every estate, I mean, the big name, the famous name, and the famous wine doesn't change the routine. You grow grapes and you work hard in the vineyard for 8 months a year, and then you just, when they're ready, you pick them and make the wine. You try to capture what you got in the vineyard, so it's mainly vineyard in the end.
So physical work, like very hands-on, what does it look like?
There is a great team behind. Like today, I think in Napa, it's kind of a new world maybe, but in Napa it's very common to have farming companies that manage the vineyards and farm the vineyards and bring the labor and support with the viticulture, but we try to be involved as much as we can, and nothing really changed for me. Today I still try to be involved as much as I can and work with the farmers and work with the growers and really understand why they're doing what they're doing and try to bring the wine knowledge and the wine quality of the site to their farming. And I think that's the biggest thing in Napa Valley, that we can really make great wines because we can collaborate.
Well put. So there's a lot of attention being paid to harvest time, which is, of course, currently the phase that we're in. Very exciting, probably a lot of trepidation too, because everything has to go well. But the reality that you're describing is that those other 8-9 months out of the years when the hard work, the daily grind, the actual learning curve at times when a vineyard throws you a curveball, right? Every day.
I mean, maybe Miguel should touch that, but I think for us in general, every day we got rain yesterday, for example. Yesterday or 2 days ago. We can plan as much as we want, but Mother Nature will do whatever their own thing, and so I think farming is the key in the end.
Miguel, join our conversation. I met in 2014, so I was going to kind of go back to that.
I think he's falling asleep.
Well, people sometimes forget that at the end of the day, it's farming what we're doing. And farming, you never have full control of what's going to happen. You can have control of what you're doing, but Mother Nature really is the one who's in charge. So that there's always, you can prepare as much as you want and as you can, but at the end of the day, there's uncertainty as part of the equation, and we just have to be ready to react and do the best we can.
So what is your background? How did you?
So my background is, I'm originally from Mexico. I was born there, and I moved here when I was 13 years old. My dad has been in the valley since '68.
Oh wow!
So he's been here for a long time. He's actually 73. And he still works 60 hours a week driving a tractor.
That's extraordinary.
He just loves it. I think that's why he's so healthy, because he still goes to work every day. So we moved here when I was 13. I have 3 siblings, 1 brother and 2 sisters. And we moved to St. Helena. So I've only lived in Mexico and in Napa Valley all my life.
What a change it must have been.
Funny thing, it's like I'm a Northern California guy. I've never been to LA in my life. I've never been past Santa Barbara. So it's always been up here. So I moved straight into St. Helena High School. And then I was always... 97 was my first harvest. I was 14 years old, I remember. And just to tell you how much the valley has changed, my first job was to be inside a 5-ton picking bin with rubber boots inside the bin, picking leaves out, stepping in the fruit all day. That was in Rutherford in '97. To today, where we're picking beans that are 5 pounds each, and every berry has to be perfect. So in a very short period of time, the valley has changed quite a bit.
97 was like a classic vintage.
Yeah.
So like my eyes got yay big when you said. I had this very different impression about how the fruit was handled at such a perfect vintage.
It's changed a lot, and in the 2000s, there was a huge shift on what quality and the expectations of the fruit and farming and everything. So that was my first, and then when I turned 16, my dad told me, "You're 16, you can work now, so find something to do," and I didn't. And I remember one weekend at 5 a.m. waking me up and saying, "I told you to get a job and you didn't listen, so I found you one." And so he started taking me to the vineyards with him, and I used to hate it with a passion, because I had to be in the sun for 10 hours Saturday and Sunday, and it was just painful. But I learned a lot, because I was young, and I hated it, but I always tried to do a good job at the same time, so I learned a lot about the vineyards from a young age. And then after high school, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I was just working and not really doing much. And then I was working at Safeway, and that's when I started going out with my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she just saw how unhappy I was with work. And she started coming to my house with a Napa Valley College booklet with all the classes. And she would highlight classes and say, "You hate working at Safeway. You should go back to school." And I highlighted some classes for you in this catalog.
Smart woman.
Thanks God for Cassandra.
So then I started in high school. Initially, I wanted to go into viticulture and enology. That was my idea. So when I started going out with her and then started having wine again, it kind of like I went back to that idea. And so I started going to the junior college and taking all the classes. But it took me a very long time to finish, and I eventually transferred to Davis. But since I moved to the States when I was 13, my high school classes didn't really prepare me for college. So I kind of had to go back to high school at the junior college. I was there for 4.5 years because I had to start from like pre-calculus all the way to calculus 3 and like general chemistry. I had to take like at the end 2 years of organic chemistry. It just took a long, long time. And so all along I started working at Silverado Farming, which is where I work now, as an intern. And I would work the growing season. Silverado Farming is a vineyard management company here in the Valley. So I would work the growing season with them and go to school at the same time. And then in September I would get internships at different wineries because I always had interest in winemaking as well, not just the vineyard side. So they would let me go and work at different wineries during harvest. And then in January I go back to pruning and all that. And after that, I finally transferred to Davis, and I got my degree in viticulture and enology, and the rest is history, as they say.
Well, let's talk about a monumental commitment that you made. All the years that you spent studying.
Yeah. Well,
what drove you? Like what?
When at first I got my associate's degrees from the junior college on viticulture and enology, and I felt that to be taken seriously, I needed to get a degree from Davis. I feel like that was not enough of an education to have a real career. So that's when I decided that I needed to focus on transferring. And I just fell in love with the industry, and it was a passion, and I knew that if I wanted to be in this industry for the rest of my life, that was the time to do the education and build a career in the future. So then I focused on what is it that I needed to do to actually transfer to Davis.
Do you think about those times when Dad woke you up early in the morning? You said it was at the time not welcome, but do you?
I'm very grateful now. Yeah, I'm very grateful, and whenever I go to my parents' house over the weekends and stuff, my dad always talks to me about vineyards now, and I think he's happy that I kind of went back to what I used to not like. In the beginning.
Yeah. So you guys met in 2014. Is it at the same time that you encountered Philippe Melka, or what happened?
Actually, we met a little bit because of Philippe. But yeah, so I decided to leave Screaming Eagle. It's kind of a transition year for me. I was really looking on going back home. I started to look at the idea of moving home, and my wife and I were here for 4 years already. We
Yeah.
had 2 kids, and we said, okay, I think it's time to move back to the family. All our families are over there.
Sure.
So then I really wanted to do one more harvest in Napa Valley, and I said, if let's not do it at Screaming, let's do something else. I mean, it's an amazing place, and it's the top of the top, but let's learn from someone else.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine that used to be the winemaker at Dana Estate, Cameron Voder, that he left already, but I met him for a coffee, and I said, hey, I'm looking for last vintage, and he said, okay, yeah, come work with me if you want, and he's a very interesting guy, and he has a great personality, so I was like, okay, that's great, I'm going to work with you for vintage, and I'm moving home. And then he called me the day after, he said, my consultant is Philippe Melka, and I think you guys should meet, and I think you're going to have a good relationship with him and good chemistry with him. And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to meet Philippe, and met Philippe for a coffee. It was a very interesting conversation for me. We sat for about an hour. We didn't talk about wine at all. I was very, very surprised and impressed. I don't know if you know a little bit of Philippe. Philippe is probably the nicest guy I know. I've been working with him for 6 years now, and I have nothing bad to say about him. He's a pure soul, and he cares about what he does, and he loves wine. But he's also about family and about family business and about people. So yeah, we had a great conversation for like an hour, and then in the end he said, hey, I don't really have a job for you. And I said, that's fine, I'm not looking for a job. I was excited to meet you. And then a week later he reached out again and said, hey, we should meet. And we met again. We talked a lot about his company and what he does as a consultant, and he moved to Napa in 91, and the whole transition for him as a foreigner coming to Napa and meeting his wife. And then he said in the end, it was funny, so he said in the end, I don't really have any job to offer you. And I said, yeah, that's fine. It's not a problem. I'm going to go work for Dana Estate. I'm happy. I'm very excited about it, and I want to move back home. And then he called me a few days later. He said, I have something for you. And I said, okay, cool. So we ended up meeting, and he ended up offering me to join to the Atelier Melka, which is the consulting company, Philippe Melka's consulting company. And I joined in April of 14. I left the Eagle, and I joined Philippe. And Miguel was actually working for Philippe in 2013 vintage. He did harvest as an intern there, kind of internship. And when I started to work with Philippe, Miguel was actually in France, doing another harvest in France. I think he was still, we always laugh that the viticulturists always wanted to be winemakers, so that's another one of them. So he did a few internships in wine before going to vineyards. And I was working with Philippe for 2014 vintage. And in the end of the vintage, we sat for a conversation, and we had a good talk, and he said, listen, I really want to keep you, and if there is any chance you want to stay, and promoted me to the head winemaker, and then I became director of winemaking, and I ended up staying, and I love what I do today, so it worked out for now.
Clearly. So where in France were you, Miguel?
I was in Bordeaux working at Chateau Fussal, which is in Passag-Lignon. I was there for 3.5 months, just working harvest at the winery. That was after I finished at Davis, and when I was coming back, I didn't have a position here, so I just kind of sent an email to everyone I knew. And when I landed back, I had a voicemail from Philippe saying, I think I have something, give me a call when you get back. And they had a winery where they needed someone to take care of the winery because they had just clear house. And that's where I met Maayan, because I was at the winery by myself, and he would come in to check on the work.
It still bothers him until today.
So that's where we met, and I was there for 6 months. I came in after harvest, and I left in the spring because Pete Richmond, who's the main partner at Silverado Farming, called me and was like, I think it's time for you to stop messing around. You need to come back and work for me full time. And he's another really nice guy, I think just as nice as Philippe, and I couldn't really say no. So then I left the winery where I was working, and I came back full time as a viticulturist for Silverado. And then in 2017, I became partner. 2018, last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow, it's a big company, isn't it?
Yeah, we farm up and down the valley and in Sonoma. I think we have about 50 clients, I would say, somewhere around there. But a lot of high-end stuff, and we do a lot of work directly with. I work with Maayan as if we work together, pretty much, because we share a lot of the vineyards that we farm. They make the wine. So I work a lot with Philippe and Maayan and other people in the valley.
So can you name some of the vineyards and some of the wines that you're making?
That we work together. That Estates, it's one of them. We farm Philippe's vineyards. He's personals for Melka wines.
And Matisse is a famous blend.
Macara, which is in Knights Valley.
Yeah.
They farm the Lale vineyards.
Lale.
Oh, that's iconic.
Yeah. Lale brand is another one in Preacher Hill. Yeah.
And then all the vineyards that go to La Pelle, when we'll touch La Pelle, they're all farmed by them. And then we source grapes from vineyards they farm as well.
So you farm both Valley Flora and the hills, which has to be a very different animal?
Very different. Yeah, you have to approach things in a different way. In the hills, you have to pay attention all the time. If you fall asleep, things can go wrong really quick. So just the water holding capacities for the most part are not the same as the Valley Flora. In the Valley Floor, you're battling most of the time bigger and trying to balance your vines. In the mountains, you're generally, it's from vineyard to vineyard, but you're fighting low vigor and trying to maintain good health of the vines and making sure they're not crashing, especially this time of the year.
Is Pritchard Hill one of the more challenging sites?
Pritchard Hill is challenging, but it's so beautiful. It's one of those challenges that you take with a smile, because it's just, in my opinion, the whole Pritchard Hill going down to Oakville is probably the best part of the Napa Valley. Just beautiful wines, beautiful soils, and just being up there in the morning and seeing the fog burn out is beautiful. When the valley's fogged, you can't see anything, and then in 20-30 minutes later, then everything opens up, and it's just like makes everything. You put everything into perspective of how lucky we are to be working here.
You guys can't see it, but your face just lights up as you're talking about it. It's so fun to see. You clearly are all in.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, and just going back to working at Safeway, and it's fine, but I was miserable, and so doing something that you like changes your life, your day to day, and just the quality of life is so much better when you enjoy what you do.
That's a life lesson right there. I think it applies to everyone. The sooner you discover what you're really into, the better your quality of life is going to be. Yeah,
I couldn't agree less. This is these days less, but we're pretty tired these days. But it's so much easier to do what you love. It makes it easier. We drive people crazy because we started today. It was very dark outside when we started, and very cold. We met at 6 a.m. already today in Sonoma in a vineyard when we were picking, and we were sitting with you tonight and with you but
we'll be up tomorrow at 4.
We're gonna be up again tomorrow, but it's really, other than you get tired like everyone else, other than that, nothing is really bothers you, because there's so much energy in the air. We work so hard for those grapes, and to get to the moment that you actually turn it into a wine, we only have one chance a year, right? That's right. And we have to capture the best we can that represent the vintage, but also every vintage has its own challenges, and every vintage, for me anyway, since I moved here, I can point on since 2010 until today, every vintage was different. And 2019 is already different. We're already looking at the chemistries. We're already having, our Sauvignon Blanc is already dry, but we have a lot of things fermenting right now. And you can already see the challenges of the vintage. And we got a couple days of rain, and we got moderate weather, and we see that there was a lot of rain this year, so we have growth in the vineyards, and to balance the vineyard was a challenge. So it's fascinating every year, and you don't really know what you're gonna get. Even if we plan and we talk about it, once you start picking the grapes, you really see the picture. We expected potassium this year, for example, because of the heavy rains, but we're getting high potassium that impact the pH of the wine. So you have to react as a winemaker, and we have to adjust the growing season. We have to adjust the farming in the end, and looking at about next year already. So there's always something, and it's fun. In the end.
You brought up the word balance several times, and typically it's applied to the wine, to the final product. But the truth is that it really starts in the vineyard.
Absolutely. I mean, to taste, we can manipulate wine, but when we're talking about the level of wines we are making, boutique wines that represent the sites we are working with, we're not trying. That's what I love about Philippe, and that's why I connected to what Philippe is doing with his consulting company, is because every wine we are making is different. If we will sit and taste our portfolio next to each other, there is nothing, you will never find two wines that are similar. Every wine represents the ownership, but also represent the places that it's coming from, and each is a key for us. And if the vineyard was not balanced, you're going to taste it in the wine. And we know the challenges, and we deal with them every day pretty much.
How do you keep all of, I mean, you have so many clients and so many vineyards. How do you keep all those strings? How do you balance your
well, for me personally, I have a great team behind me and with me. And I think that's what again, I'm kind of saying a lot of good things out of Philippe, but I think Philippe brought something very unique to California as an approach as a consultant. Because if we look at Napa Valley, it's a lot about consulting winemakers.
Yep.
But Philippe built a consulting company, which is a very different philosophy of having. That's why the name of Atelier Melka, Atelier in French, is a workshop, and the idea was a collaboration of winemakers. Everyone in the team is a winemaker. They all have these fancy degrees from UC Davis and other great universities, and they all worked as winemakers, but they choose to work together and collaborate. And so we have a great team that works on the multiple projects we are working, but I try to stay involved as much as I can, and I feel like because I know every site I work with. I've been there at least a few times a month at least, and so we always, luckily the valley is fairly small, so you can actually stay in touch with the vineyards and the wineries on pretty much on a daily basis.
So is Philippe, in fact, kind of galvanizing all this energy? What role does he play? Is it both mentorship, kind of a push and pull, and facilitating?
I think Philippe plays two roles, because one role is Philippe is a winemaker.
Yes.
And he loves wine, and he loves vineyards, and he loves soils, and he's so passionate about what he does. And I don't think Philippe will ever retire, because I really think he loves it. So it's he's enjoying it. And during harvest, Philippe is in a different gear. He's working his ass off, and it's very impressive to see. I mean, I think this year is his 27th or 28th vintage in Napa Valley. So he's been there for a while. And he still wakes up first in the morning. I will talk with him. Today we talked with him about 6 a.m. in the morning. We're already talking, and he's on another vineyard, already walking a vineyard or checking a vineyard or going to a peak or tasting grapes or tasting tanks. And so I feel like during harvest and during the growing season, Philippe is very involved. And the other part is mentoring, obviously. The team, the philosophy, the wineries we work with. We have winemakers on sites, and I feel like he's such a charismatic person with so much knowledge that he's playing the role of a mentor, no doubt.
The conclusion of this interview can be found in the next podcast, already available for your download. Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson.